Chapter 1. Cassandra. Cass was 8 years old when she decided to dedicate the rest of her life to making Sebastian Sax's existence a living nightmare. Yes, she was only a child, but no amount of emotional maturity that came with age could ever dull the pure, unfiltered hatred she felt every time she saw his ridiculous mop of chestnut brown hair. Cassandra's own hair was the color of ripe wheat, glowing like spun gold beneath the summer sun. She was incredibly proud that her mother, though with great reluctance, had allowed her to grow it long, thick, and well past her shoulders. That was practically a miracle, since such an impractical hairstyle was usually forbidden among the young members of their pack, who were expected to become warriors. But while Cassandra was considered one of the most promising future fighters of her generation, she was equally proud of her beautiful hair. Which was exactly why Sebastian's latest prank hit her so hard. He had stuck a piece of chewing gum into it, the very same piece he had been chewing for an alarmingly long time. Looking back, what frustrated her even more was that she hadn't seen it coming, despite her parents' endless warnings about Sebastian and the other children from his pack. Cassandra's pack and Sebastian's lived side by side, separated by a border deep within the forest. Long ago, the two clans had been one. They had split decades earlier when two wolves competing for the position of alpha fell in love with the same mate. Their friendship ended, and with it, any desire to remain part of the same pack. The once powerful and prosperous pack became two bitter rivals, each blaming the other for every hardship that followed. Cass, her older brother, and the other wolf pups loved exploring the forest, and they often ran into children from the rival pack. Naturally, they played together. But after Cass innocently told her parents about those adventures, they forbade her from ever seeing those children again. If they're anything like the rest of the Silver Pine pack, whatever that was supposed to mean, they aren't worth your time, especially Sebastian. After all, he was the alpha's son. At first, Cass was genuinely confused. She actually liked Sebastian. He had taught her how to skip stones across the water far better than anyone else, and he could build the most amazing tree forts she had ever seen. But after her father declared that his daughter should choose better friends, Cass came up with a new excuse for meeting Sebastian and the others. From then on, it was all about beating the other pack. What had once been innocent childhood games quickly evolved into an increasingly fierce rivalry. Nights were spent planning strategies. Everyone was told to put more effort into every competition. Soon, every challenge was taken with absolute seriousness. There was no room for mistakes anymore, because losing had become completely unacceptable. The day Sebastian stuck gum in Cass's hair, the two packs were competing in a tree climbing contest. The goal was simple. Whichever team reached the top the fastest would win. Each participant's time was added together, and the team with the lowest total claimed victory. Unfortunately, both sides were almost perfectly matched. Everything came down to the final two climbers. Cass went first. She reached the top in record time, but to her horror, when Sebastian's turn came, he was even faster. So she did what any sensible wolf would do. She tossed a small pebble at his back. Startled, Sebastian lost his footing, slipped, and fell from the tree, costing his team the race. "That's cheating," Sebastian protested as he climbed back to his feet, completely unharmed. No one was particularly worried anyway. He was a werewolf. Cass stuck out her tongue. "If it's not against the rules, it isn't cheating."
"We don't even have any rules," Sebastian shot back.
"Exactly. Now stop being a sore loser and announce us as the winners," Cass ordered. Her teammates erupted into triumphant cheers. She knelt beside Sebastian, patiently waiting for him to place the traditional crown of woven branches and wildflowers on her head. To children, there was no greater honor. Instead, Sebastian spat his chewing gum directly onto her hair. Cass's eyes went wide with horror. "Oops," he said with a smug grin. "Slipped." Cass screamed as she desperately tried to pull the gum free, only tangling it deeper into her curls. Sebastian laughed. To him, the whole thing was hilarious, not only because he thought Cass deserved it for cheating, but because he had never imagined she could care so much about something as silly as her hair. Then, Cass's eyes filled with tears. Her desperate gray gaze met Sebastian's. For about 10 seconds, he genuinely felt bad. Until Cass launched herself at him and punched him square in the jaw. After that, all chaos broke loose. Cassandra would meet the mage for the first time a month later, shortly after her 9th birthday. The first meeting, but far from the last. Chapter 2. Adrian Cass was 9 years old when she met the mage for the first time. Although she wouldn't sell her soul to him until 12 years later, Adrian was genuinely intrigued when a small blonde head appeared over the edge of his counter. After all, it wasn't every day that an ordinary child dared to enter his shop. The place had been enchanted long ago to repel anyone who came near. The moment someone approached, they would be overcome by an inexplicable sense of unease. And if they somehow found the courage to open the front door, that unease would turn into paralyzing terror. "Are you the maid who grants wishes?" the little girl asked, seemingly unimpressed as Adrian leaned over the counter and crouched down in front of her. "And who wants to know?" he replied with a frown, hoping it might scare her away. It didn't. Unfortunately for Adrian, Cass was a werewolf. Despite her young age, she possessed the same excessive confidence and astonishing lack of common sense that, in his opinion, plagued most of her kind. "So, you mean brave?" Iris, Adrian's assistant, would ask him later after hearing him make a similar remark. "Same thing," he would answer. Adrian immediately realized getting rid of Cassandra wouldn't be easy. The stubborn expression on her face reminded him so much of an angry pit bull that, for a brief moment, he actually wondered whether pit bull werewolves existed. He'd have to look into that later. "I'm Cassandra Harrow of the Blackthorn Pack," the girl announced proudly. "And I'm here to make a wish." "You want to make a wish?" Adrian repeated quickly, already searching for the best way to talk her out of it. If he failed to change this foolish little girl's mind, he'd ruin her life before it had truly begun. "You do know there's always a price." Cass nodded with complete seriousness. "This should cover it," she declared confidently, placing a small pink piggy bank on the counter. "It's all my savings." Adrian fought to keep a straight face as a handful of coins clinked onto the glass surface. "And how much have you managed to save?" he asked. "At least $30, Cass replied proudly. "I'm sure that seems like a fortune to you," Adrian said calmly, "but I don't want money." Cassandra let out an exaggerated sigh. "Then just tell me what you do want, Stretch. I don't have all day." Adrian cleared his throat. "And what wish is so important that it simply can't wait?" he asked, only mildly curious. "I need you to make someone go bald," Cass said, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "Can you do that?" "Me?" Adrian raised an eyebrow dramatically. "An immortal, mage with limitless power? Can I make someone bald?" He pretended to consider it. "I suppose I can." "Really?" Cass practically squealed with excitement before he continued. "However, since granting a wish means taking whatever is most precious to you in return, I'd recommend buying a good razor instead." Cass opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Outside, the sun had begun to set, though one corner of the shop was still bathed in warm golden light. The rest of the room lay in darkness, just the way Adrian liked it. "What do you mean, whatever's most precious to me?" Cass asked suspiciously. "What's that supposed to be?" "I can't tell you. It's different for everyone. It could be anything, from your PlayStation to one of your parents." Noticing her eyes widen ever so slightly, he added, following a hunch, "Or a brother or sister." "I have a twin brother," Cass said quietly. For the first time since walking into the shop, she looked uncertain. There it was. Adrian felt satisfied. The girl loved her brother. And when he said he would take whatever she treasured most, she had most likely assumed, as most people did, that the price would be her brother's life. In reality, Adrian had never taken anyone's life as payment. He couldn't. Perhaps the demon who had granted him his powers understood that most people would never make a wish if they believed it would cost either their own life or the life of someone they loved. If her brother truly was the person she valued above all else, then granting her wish would inevitably separate them, either physically or emotionally. That alone would be devastating. But since she hadn't asked for clarification, Adrian let her believe the price would be her brother's life, hoping it would prove to be a more effective deterrent. "So," Adrian said at last, "are you really willing to risk losing your brother just so some boy loses his hair?" "Sebastian isn't just some boy," Cass replied with obvious disgust, wrinkling her nose. "He's the worst person who's ever walked this earth." Adrian struggled to keep a straight face. "Is he really that bad?" he asked. "Worse," Cass declared. "He's a menace." She looked extremely pleased with herself for remembering the word. "A destroyer of lives." Adrian nodded solemnly. "I'm sure he is." Then he added, "But maybe you don't actually need to wish for his downfall. You could always, I don't know, make his life miserable yourself. You strike me as a very capable child." Cass slowly nodded as she considered the idea. "Yeah," she thought for another moment. "I guess I don't really need you after all." Finally, she shrugged. "You actually seem pretty useless." "Oh, absolutely." Adrian slid her piggy bank back across the counter. "Well then, good luck making that menace's life miserable, little Cassandra." "I'm not little." She scooped up the piggy bank and lifted her chin defiantly. "You're the giraffe." With that, she stormed out of the shop. For a brief moment, Adrian actually felt a little sorry for Sebastian, despite having absolutely no idea what the poor boy had done to earn such fierce hatred. Chapter 3. Cassandra. Cass was 11 when she finally got her revenge. It wasn't as though she hadn't tried before. There had been the infamous kidnapped pet incident, during which Cass and her twin brother hid their own beloved hedgehog before sending themselves a ransom note signed with Sebastian's name, forcing an innocent boy to publicly apologize for something he had never done. It had been a fairly successful act of revenge, except Sebastian immediately retaliated with something even more elaborate, making all of Cass's efforts meaningless. He forged a letter of apology, pretending it had been written by Cass herself, listing in detail every terrible thing she had supposedly done over the past few months. The confession included staging the kidnapping, sabotaging her own pack's harvest, stealing valuable property from Sebastian's father, and spreading malicious rumors about Sebastian and his family. Sebastian's parents quickly believed every word of it, especially since many of the accusations were based on real problems their pack had recently faced. They demanded a meeting with Cass's parents in front of members from both packs. It ended in a loud, humiliating argument. Cass stood in the middle of it all, completely stunned. That was how things went for the next 2 years. Cass would invent a new revenge scheme, An offended Sebastian would answer with one that was even better. The cycle never stopped. Until Cass turned 11. Her 11th birthday meant Sebastian had just turned 13, and like every 13-year-old wolf in the region, he was expected to take part in the annual one-day hunt through the forest, alongside the other young werewolves his age. The tradition was simple. Whoever returned with the largest and most impressive prey would receive the winner's wreath and bring great honor to their pack. No one doubted Sebastian would win. He was, by far, the most skilled hunter among this year's participants. Cass wasn't even old enough to compete. But this was finally her chance to beat Sebastian. And she intended to win, no matter what. So several weeks before the hunt, she returned to the mage's shop. Cass burst into Adrian's store, burning with righteous determination, and explained that she wanted him to make her strong enough to win. "So you're willing to risk losing your beloved twin brother over this?" Adrian snorted. "I didn't realize you were that lazy." "I'm not lazy," Cass protested, clenching her fists. "Then why come to me with a request like that when you could win the hunt the ordinary way, by getting better?" "I can't." Cass fell silent. She had been about to say she had no chance of winning on her own. She was younger, not good enough. "Would it really count as a victory?" Adrian asked quietly. "If you only defeated your Sebastian because of magic?" Cass gritted her teeth. Then she got to work. Weeks before the hunt, she secretly obtained the competition route. Every night she studied it, memorizing every detail, every place where prey was most likely to appear. During the day, she shifted into her wolf form and disappeared into the forest, learning the terrain by heart, marking deer trails, and identifying the thicker, more dangerous areas where bears were known to roam. She practiced shifting faster, moving silently, blending into the shadows and the undergrowth. One cold morning, her breath hanging in the crisp air, Cassandra found a bear. Her heart pounded as she watched it from a distance, studying its massive size and the terrifying strength of its paws. Over the following days, she tracked it in human form, so her wolf scent wouldn't give her away, carefully learning its habits and routines. On the morning of the hunt, Cassandra rose before dawn. Every muscle in her body was taut with anticipation. She entered the forest alone, following a barely visible trail she had memorized in advance, turning away from the route Sebastian and the other young wolves had taken. She slipped silently through the brush, her heart pounding as she waited for the beast to appear. And just as the sun began to rise over the horizon, it did. The fight lasted far longer than Cassandra had expected. Exhausted and trembling with effort, she caught herself wondering more than once whether attacking such a dangerous creature had been a terrible mistake. Maybe she couldn't defeat it. Worse, maybe it would kill her. Was there even a chance of escaping now? Only one thought kept her moving, despite the burning in her muscles and the fear hammering through her chest. If she didn't return with that bear, Sebastian would win. She couldn't allow that. She wouldn't. The bear stood between her and victory. The bear had to die. When she finally emerged from the forest, dragging the enormous carcass behind her, the crowd's reaction was immediate. The stunned silence broke into deafening applause and astonished cheers. She let the massive body fall in the center of the clearing and straightened to her full height, breathing hard from exhaustion. The elders, including her own parents, exchanged looks of utter disbelief before the high elder stepped forward. His expression carried reluctant admiration. He lifted the victor's wreath that tradition had reserved for Sebastian and placed it on Cassandra's head. "In recognition of an unprecedented feat," he proclaimed, his voice echoing across the clearing, "we declare Cassandra the champion of this year's hunt." Cass had never expected her victory to cause such an uproar. Nor had she imagined it would turn her into something of a local prodigy. Not merely another participant, but someone already spoken of as a future legend. Truthfully, she didn't care very much. At least, not as much as she cared about the expression on Sebastian's face. That look, pure, genuine shock, was the only reward she had ever wanted. She lifted her chin proudly and met his gaze. In the afternoon light, his eyes looked almost green, wide with surprise, frustration, anger. But there was something else there now, something dangerously close to admiration. The feeling hit Cass like lightning. Her head spun with pride. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribs. She didn't know it yet, but one day she would become almost addicted to that feeling. Though, unfortunately for her, the only person who could ever make her feel it was Sebastian. Chapter 4. Cassandra. Cass was 13 when she defeated an older beta from her own pack in combat for the very first time. She fought with fierce determination. She had become a force to be reckoned with. And even though she was still very young, Cass was certain she would only grow stronger. Now she always braided her hair into a tight, practical braid. She hated leaving it loose, even in the shower. It still hurt that it had never grown back to its former length. Her father had begun constantly pitting her against her twin brother, Ronan, testing their abilities against one another. He never said it outright, but Cass knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to decide which of them was better suited to become the next alpha. The final decision wouldn't be made until they turned 18, but in Cass's mind, there had never been any doubt. She would win. She would settle for nothing less. Because on the other side of the forest, where Sebastian's pack lived, almost everyone already believed he would become their next alpha. And if Sebastian became an alpha, then so would she. She would accept no other outcome, because the thought of standing beneath him would probably kill her. He would never admire her again if she wasn't at least his equal. Better yet, she intended to surpass him in everything. Lately, however, beating him at anything had become nearly impossible. Yes, Cass had defeated a fully grown beta. Yes, she beat Ronan over and over again. But Sebastian was different. Ever since Cass's victory 2 years earlier, the two of them had begun sneaking into the forest at night, either to hunt or to fight. Now it was only the two of them. Their rivalry had long since outgrown the need to involve the rest of their packs. No one else mattered anymore. Once, their fights had been nearly even, with no clear winner. Now that was beginning to change. For her age, Cass was tall, but she was still lean and slender. There was still a softness to her cheeks that hadn't quite left childhood behind. Sebastian, meanwhile, had become a teenager. He was getting taller, broader across the shoulders. Every day his muscles became more defined, more powerful. Sometimes Cass could feel that new strength beneath her fingertips whenever their bodies collided during a fight. It was becoming easier and easier for him to twist her arms behind her back, to pin her to the ground, or against the trunk of a tree. His hazel-green eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Cass was terrified that soon he would simply lose interest in her, that she would no longer be a worthy opponent. Her father had always told her, "You're only worth what you're capable of." So between blows, she told Sebastian about her latest victory. He smirked. "The others are probably letting you win," he said. "Your skills aren't good enough, and your technique is barely tolerable." "You're pulling your punches," Cass shot back, because she wasn't stupid. She hated that he held back. She hated his broad shoulders. While she herself was only just beginning puberty, still as skinny as ever, not even the slightest hint of a woman's curves, though she didn't want curves anyway. breasts and hips wouldn't help her in a fight. What she wanted was the height and strength that came with age, because if the difference in their size had become impossible to ignore, then it was absolutely unacceptable that he was trying to protect her because of it. Never before had Cass felt so small, so insignificant. "At least try to hide it better," she snapped with open contempt as she swept his legs out from under him with a perfectly timed move. "If you're not going to fight me seriously, then don't waste my time." She rolled with the momentum, somehow ending up on top of him, straddling him and pinning him to the ground with a hold she had no idea how she'd managed to pull off. Sebastian blinked. Confusion and surprise flashed across his face. Cass stared down at him, hardly believing her own luck. Her thighs held him firmly in place. Her hands pressed his shoulders into the ground. A faint flush began to spread across Sebastian's cheekbones. Beautiful. Without realizing it, Cass loosened her grip on his shirt, because she had become distracted by how dark his eyes had suddenly become. Dark with something she couldn't name. It was a new look, a little like the admiration she had occasionally caught in his eyes after one of her victories, but also completely different. Sebastian didn't move. Only his chest rose and fell in quick breaths. His lips were slightly parted. He was breathing hard. Cass's mouth suddenly went dry. Her throat tightened. She had no idea why. Maybe it was because Sebastian smelled different now. His scent had become much stronger. It surrounded her like a dense cloud. Everything suddenly seemed to move unbearably slowly. Not that it felt entirely unpleasant. Almost without thinking, Cass leaned a little closer. But the instant she shifted, Sebastian moved. In one swift motion, he rolled them over, pinning her beneath him, using the weight of his larger body to hold her in place. "Stop moving," he groaned against her neck. "You stop moving," Cass complained, her voice sounding far more whiny than she had intended. Then, Cass felt Sebastian's teeth brush against her neck. Her eyes flew open in disbelief. She grabbed a fistful of his hair, trying to shove him away. "Get off me!" she snarled, as genuine fear sank its claws into her mind. Sebastian obeyed instantly. He jerked back as though he'd been burned. Were you about to?" Cass couldn't even force herself to finish the question. Had he really been about to bite her? She was only 13, but she knew exactly what a mating bite meant. It was a declaration of claim. The ultimate act of dominance. Something done only with the intention of making someone your mate. The thought alone made Cass's head spin, leaving her torn between fear, embarrassment, and a strange, inexplicable disappointment. "Of course not," Sebastian shot back fiercely. He said it as though the very idea disgusted him. And that was good. Cass had absolutely no desire to become anyone's mate at 13, least of all Sebastian's. "But I scared you," Sebastian muttered quietly. For the first time, he looked genuinely guilty, as though Cass were something fragile, someone who needed to be protected. Humiliation flared inside her like fire. "Shut up," she snapped, hastily wiping away tears she hadn't even realized were there. In one quick motion, she jumped to her feet and ran. The following night, Sebastian never came to their usual meeting place. After that, they hardly saw each other for a very long time. Chapter 5. Cassandra. Cass was 15 when she saw Sebastian again. Well, not exactly. Over the past 2 years, she'd caught glimpses of him more than once. They just hardly spoke anymore. Occasionally, they exchanged a few insults or sarcastic remarks, but even that was nothing compared to the real fights they used to have. Still, his absence and his growing indifference slowly drove Cass insane. So much so that Sebastian began appearing in her dreams. Unfortunately, those dreams refused to let go of her when she woke each morning. She would wake up, gasping for breath. She dreamed that they met again in the forest, that they fought again, that she defeated him, that she saw admiration in his eyes once more. And then, in almost every dream, Sebastian bit her neck. Cass would wake with a sharp gasp, the memory of his teeth brushing her skin. The real sensation had become so tangled with the imagined versions that it haunted her during the day as well. Sometimes she couldn't think about anything else. She wanted those dreams to stop. She didn't want them, and she saw no way to get rid of them, except, perhaps, magic. "Can you take my dreams away?" she asked the mage. Standing beside him was a girl Cass had never seen before, a human. Strawberry blonde hair, blue eyes, and not the slightest trace of magic. Why an ordinary human girl was spending time with a mage was anyone's guess. Cass wasn't particularly interested in asking. What kind of nightmares could a 15-year-old girl have that would make her willing to destroy her own life with a wish? She overheard the human whisper quietly to Adrian, apparently believing Cass wouldn't hear. She was wrong. Cass was a werewolf. Her hearing was excellent. "Dreams often reflect feelings or thoughts we've buried," Adrian replied. "The best way to get rid of them is to face them." "How?" Cass demanded, crossing her arms. The girl, clearly unaccustomed to dealing with werewolves, stiffened at her tone and instinctively snapped back. Adrian merely snorted. "Iris," he said, turning to his companion, "what do you usually dream about?" The blonde frowned, making it painfully obvious that she didn't want to answer. "Mostly about my father," she admitted at last, glancing nervously at Cass. She clearly wanted her to leave as soon as possible. "Your father?" Cass echoed, raising an eyebrow. "He died recently," Iris explained. "I dreamed that I see him again, that he's alive." Cass paled slightly as she processed the answer. She gave a brief nod and left the shop just as quickly as she'd entered. Iris's words had struck a painful chord. Suddenly, Cass realized she wanted, no, she needed to talk to Sebastian about what had almost happened that night in the forest. And that realization frightened her more than anything else. So the next time she saw him, she didn't dare approach him. She didn't even dare meet his eyes. It happened at a lakeside gathering late one evening. Cass wasn't stupid. She knew perfectly well it was going to be a real party. Normally, she hardly went anywhere. She trained too much. And when she wasn't training, she accompanied her father to meetings, negotiations, and discussions about pack affairs. Whatever little free time she had left was spent studying at home, just like most teenagers in their pack. If Cass rarely went anywhere, her brother was even worse. But he'd been invited by a girl from one of their allied packs, several hours away, and Ronan was hopelessly infatuated with her. There was no chance he was going to miss an opportunity to see her, away from the watchful eyes of adults. "Cass, I'm telling you," he said excitedly. "She's the one. Kay is my fated mate. I know it." Cass simply rolled her eyes. Fated mates and all the obsessions surrounding them had never interested her, especially at their age. As far as she was concerned, choosing a mate was less about romance and more about forming a strategic alliance that benefited the pack. Their father had made it abundantly clear that he expected nothing less from his children, especially since one of them would become the future alpha. Ronan was a fool if he thought Kay suited their father's ambitions. Still, the hopeful look in her brother's eyes and the excitement in his smile made her agree to go. Several friends from their pack joined them, 6 teenagers altogether. Late that evening, they slipped out of their homes unnoticed and rode to the lake. What they hadn't expected was that Kay's pack happened to be friends with another pack, which, in turn, was friends with Sebastian's. They had been invited too. Sebastian was even taller now, broader through the shoulders. He was nearly 18. Judging by the number of girls watching him, he was considered attractive. Personally, Cass couldn't understand what they all saw in him. His eyes were just ordinary brown, though under certain light, they turned a warm shade of green. Cass was convinced she'd seen far prettier eyes somewhere before. He was well built, but so were most boys his age, and his chestnut hair was just as hopelessly messy as it had been when they were children. Maybe it was the smile. When he looked at someone he liked, one corner of his mouth curved into a crooked, mischievous grin. Not at Cass, of course. It only irritated her. But perhaps the other girls mistook that smile for flirting, for the promise of something more. Cass frowned at the thought, immediately deciding it was completely unacceptable and refused to think about it any longer. "Does Sebastian Sachs have freckles?" Jess, one of Cass's closest friends, asked after hearing her observations. "I never even noticed." Cass rolled her eyes. How could anyone fail to notice Sebastian's freckles, especially the ones scattered across the bridge of his nose? She had absolutely no idea. No, she finally decided, watching him walk off to grab another bottle of beer while laughing at someone's joke. It's not his looks. If people notice him, it's because of his confidence. The way he carries himself, the way he speaks. There's already a quiet authority in every movement he makes. The kind that belongs to an alpha. A calm sense of superiority that everyone around the lake instinctively recognizes. That night, Cass dreamed of the lake again. But this time, everything was different. Now everyone was looking at her. She was the one they admired. She was the one standing tall, radiating authority, because she too was a future alpha. Sebastian stood among the crowd, subject to her authority, just like everyone else. Yet it was his submission that filled the wolf inside Cass with overwhelming pride. She woke feeling powerful, free, completely in control, and she knew exactly what she had to do. As children, she had matched Sebastian in strategy. Now, she needed to become his equal in dealing with people. Perhaps then he would stop looking at her like a child. Perhaps then he would see her as his rival again. A rival he would never again dare to even think about marking as his mate. Chapter 6. Cassandra. Cass was only hours away from turning 16 when, a couple of weeks after watching Sebastian charm everyone around the bonfire by the lake, she finally put her plan into action. That evening, there was another party, only this time it was at a club. Cass had no trouble getting inside because, even though her 16th birthday was still a few hours away, she looked older. Cassandra was tall. She had long, beautiful legs that everyone would inevitably stare at in the dress she had chosen. And with enough makeup, she could easily pass for a young adult. She knew she was attractive, perhaps not the most beautiful girl in the pack. Her features were probably too sharp, lacking the softer, more feminine delicacy needed to truly claim that title. But she had beautiful, full lips, dark gray eyes, and, most importantly, a body that, as she had noticed more than once, nearly every man in her pack had allowed his gaze to linger on at least once. The number of interested looks she received when she entered the club suited her perfectly well. And once she started dancing, even more eyes turned toward her. Her brother was far less pleased. He was clearly uncomfortable. But that was his problem, not Cass's. As she danced, she found herself between two boys, both slightly older than she was. Cass had no doubt she could easily defeat either one of them in a fight, so she felt completely at ease when her eyes met Sebastian's across the room. He was standing at the bar with a drink in his hand. His eyes widened slightly, only for a moment. Then his lips tightened into a grim line. A shadow of displeasure crossed his face. His body shifted, almost imperceptibly, as though he were about to come over to her. Cass's heart began beating faster in anticipation. But then one of Sebastian's friends, a wolf from Kay's pack, whom she had seen before, lightly punched him in the shoulder, distracting him. The next moment, they were already walking away toward a small group seated in a private booth. Cass's heart sank heavily. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. Was that it? Was that all the reward she received for her efforts? Nothing more than a fleeting glance from her rival. And even that held only mild irritation instead of the all-consuming fury she had grown accustomed to during the years of their rivalry. No, that would not do. Never. If Sebastian now considered himself so far above her and her pack that he no longer believed their rivalry was worth his attention, then Cass would simply have to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. She watched him discreetly, watched how comfortable he seemed beside that wolf from Kay's pack who had dared to steal his attention. They appeared to be close friends. Apparently, that friend was more interesting than Cass. Fine. When Sebastian's friend left the group and headed toward the bar for another drink, Cass went there as well, casually placing herself right beside her target. It took less than a minute for him to notice her. His scent immediately filled with obvious interest, making Cass want to roll her eyes. "I think I've seen you somewhere before," he said rather awkwardly. Cass could not understand what Sebastian saw in someone who could barely speak properly, but it did not matter. "I don't think so. I would have remembered," she replied, giving him a wink. The scent of desire coming from him grew even stronger. "This might be too forward, and you can absolutely say no. But can I buy you a beer?" Pete asked, unable to take his eyes off her lips. "I don't want beer," Cass replied, giving him a faint smile that made Pete blush. "Then maybe a cocktail?" Cass shook her head, fluttering her eyelashes slightly. "A glass of wine?" Pete asked, sounding almost breathless now. Cass laughed and leaned closer to his right ear. "Or maybe we should go somewhere quieter," she whispered. Pete was not the first person Cass had kissed, and he was not the worst. Like all the kisses before him, it did not particularly matter to her. But at least he did not try to force his tongue down her throat, so it could have been worse. Still, Cass did not have much time. She carefully turned them until they were positioned directly in front of Sebastian's booth. Within seconds, there could be no mistake. Even from that distance, Cass felt the sudden, powerful wave of fury flooding Sebastian's familiar scent. That hot, spicy anger grew stronger and stronger. There was no doubt. He was already coming toward them. His scent completely filled her lungs and clouded her mind at the exact moment Pete deepened the kiss. A quiet, confused moan escaped Cass's lips. Naturally, it was entirely because of the kiss. She was 100% focused on the kiss, and not at all on Sebastian's overwhelming scent. "Get away from her!" Sebastian yanked Pete away so violently that he lost his balance and would certainly have fallen if there had not been a column behind him. Sebastian's face was twisted with contempt. His entire body was tense, but he did not even look at Cass. It made her want to scream. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Pete asked in shock. "What the hell is your problem?" "My problem." Sebastian looked as though he was seconds away from hitting him. "She's 16. Do you think it's acceptable to take advantage of her because she's underage?" Cass rolled her eyes, holding back a sigh. "I didn't know she was 16, Pete said with a grimace, casting Cass a guilty look. "She just doesn't look." He gestured vaguely toward Cass. That only made Sebastian angrier. Pete noticed. Wolves instinctively knew not to provoke stronger, more dominant wolves.
It was practically written into their DNA. Realizing he could not handle Sebastian, Pete visibly shrank under his furious stance.
"Sorry, Cass," he said, reaching for her hand, probably hoping the gesture would calm Sebastian down. It did not. "Don't you fucking dare touch her," Sebastian growled, lunging toward Pete. But someone suddenly caught his arm. "Enough," Cass said. She filled her voice with enough authority that she knew he would have no choice but to listen. "I wanted him to kiss me. Leave him alone." Sebastian's jaw clenched tightly. But now all of his aggression was directed entirely at Cass. For the first time in 3 years, his gaze was heavy, dark. His entire posture was threateningly tense, and his scent, it struck Cass straight in the head again. She suddenly realized how much she had missed this. The thought unsettled her slightly. "Cass," he said, breathing heavily through his nose as though trying to regain control. "Can't you smell how badly he—" Sebastian was trembling with barely contained fury. Their faces were only inches apart. His eyes glowed bright gold. Cass almost wanted to warn him. A human might notice. But it felt far too good to finally be the main object of his hatred again. He wanted more than just a kiss, Sebastian said quietly. His fingers wrapped around Cass's arm like a warning, and it looked far too possessive. The wolf inside Cass practically ached with satisfaction. "I would have been more than happy to let him spend time with me," she said with a deliberately crude smirk. Sebastian's grip tightened so hard that it hurt. For one brief moment, every instinct in Cass's body warned her about something she could not understand. His gaze slowly lowered to her exposed neck with a kind of painful concentration. And the insane thought that he was about to bite her bloomed in Cass's mind. Her breath stopped in her chest. But Sebastian suddenly released her, turned around, and walked away. She remained standing there, breathing heavily and unable to move. Cass was 16, but in that moment, she felt 8 years old again, just like the day he had stuck gum in her hair. And with horror, she realized she was about to cry. Then he stopped abruptly, turned back, walked toward her again, and said curtly, "Tomorrow night, our place in the forest." Triumph swept over Cass. Chapter 7. Cassandra. Cassandra was 17 when her meetings with Sebastian in the forest took a completely different turn. That night, they barely spoke before throwing themselves at each other once again. Cass quickly provoked him, making sure he was the one to strike first. He was angry with her. She could feel it, because she had managed to steal the attention of yet another one of his friends. She wanted him to understand. She could take anyone's attention away from him whenever she wished. People only looked at Sebastian because she allowed them to, and if she wanted, she could take that attention from him at any moment. Sebastian was strong. Cass was fast. They were both exceptional fighters, instinctively exploiting each other's weaknesses, refined through years of observation and endless battles. She struck. He blocked. He kicked. She spun, shifting her body back into a more advantageous position. They were perfectly matched. The fight seemed to last forever. Their heavy breathing mingled and echoed through the forest. Cass's back ached from repeatedly slamming into tree trunks. Blood raced beneath her skin. "I think that's enough for tonight," Sebastian said, sooner than she expected, realizing that neither of them had managed to gain the upper hand. "We're done." There was a kind of exhausted finality in his eyes that made Cass's heart tighten painfully with fear over what it might mean. "Done?" she snarled, snapping her leg out in a kick Sebastian easily avoided. The mere thought that whatever existed between them might be over nearly blinded Cass with rage. Why was he still treating her like a little girl who needed protecting? She was grown now. She matched him blow for blow. He no longer needed to hold back around her. Couldn't he see that they were equals? She screamed in fury, launched herself at Sebastian, and knocked them both to the ground. For a while, they struggled. Their eyes met. Cass did not understand how the kiss began. She only realized that her hands were already tangled in Sebastian's short hair as she deepened it, greedily taking in every sound he made. The kiss was unlike any Cass had ever experienced. It felt like reclaiming something that belonged to her. Hard, furious. Neither of them cared anymore whether it was right. The moment their lips met, they had already crossed far beyond the point of doubt. Sharp teeth grazed Cass's lower lip, and they seemed to grow more insistent when Sebastian realized she could kiss him just as deeply as he kissed her. His touch became rougher, as though he wanted Cass to understand that even if he was not the first man in her life, he would be the best. And as Cass tried to pull him even closer, she thought he was right, though she would rather die than admit it to him. She wrapped her legs around his waist. Sebastian left her lips and pressed hot kisses along her neck. His hands gripped her hips tightly. His name escaped her lips between ragged breaths. She could no longer control herself. She only pressed herself more tightly against his strong body, savoring every sound he made while her arms tightened around his neck. She did not object when their eyes met, and he seemed to search her face for permission. And she did not object when soon afterward a sharp pain tore through her. On the contrary, she encouraged him. With words, with touches, with kisses. Because how could she do anything else when he looked at her like that, as though Cass were everything to him? Only later, when she was alone in her room beneath the covers of her own bed, did regret begin to tighten slowly around her throat. They should not have done it, she told herself. What had happened between them was only supposed to happen between fated mates, or at the very least, between people who were not sworn enemies. If her father discovered the truth, he would almost certainly strip Cass of any chance of becoming the next alpha, and it could also ignite open war with Sebastian's pack. But the worst part was something else. Would Sebastian still respect her as a rival after what had happened between them? Would he look at her differently? Would he even come back the next night to fight her again, as he was supposed to? He came, and they did fight, but not for long. Not when their bodies ended up so close again. Not when Cass's scent still lingered on Sebastian's skin, blending with his own. Not when his eyes briefly closed and his lips parted the moment he caught his own scent on her. His hands still held her just as tightly. But now it was an entirely different kind of struggle. One Cass could not resist, and did not want to. Especially when Sebastian kept looking at her, as though he would never be able to look at anyone else again. The following night, their pretend fight lasted even less time, and the night after that, they did not even bother pretending they had come there to fight. Their lips met immediately in a demanding kiss. Their hands moved urgently over each other's bodies. Every touch made Cass tremble. There was no pain anymore, only pleasure she had never even known existed, and new feelings, just as powerful, just as consuming as fury. Only she did not yet know what to call them. Every night when she returned home, Cass told herself it had been the last time, that they should not be doing what they were doing. It made no sense. It would inevitably destroy everything. Cass's future, Sebastian's future, the fragile peace between their packs. But neither of them could ask the elders for permission. Cass knew they would never receive it. Never. Their parents, their alphas, had hated one another for generations. For her and Sebastian, there were only two possible paths: to remain enemies at best, or strangers to one another at worst. There was not supposed to be anything else. There could not be, at least not openly. Cass felt as though she had always known that. She simply had not understood it, and had not wanted to understand it. Now, it was already too late. The following evening, as soon as the sun sank below the horizon, restlessness began to build inside her again, and she ran into the forest, to Sebastian. As soon as she was certain no one would notice, she could hardly wait to feel his hands on her again, to feel his embrace tighten the moment their lips met after an entire day apart. She told herself that perhaps, in time, the novelty of the feeling would fade, and with it, her desire to continue. She did not dare think about what she would feel if it faded for Sebastian first. No, she would not think about that, because if it ever happened, who would she become then? The next time Cass entered the shop, Adrian was not there. His human friend sat alone, distractedly sorting through books when Cass walked inside with her heart pounding wildly. "When will he be back?" she asked, closing her eyes in despair when Iris said he had gone away somewhere, and only God knew for how long. "I need him, to free me from this madness." She looked exhausted, almost feverish, as she began pacing the shop like an animal trapped in a cage. "What exactly did you want him to do?" Iris asked carefully. "I want to get rid of—" Cass could not force herself to say the words and fell silent. Heat rose to her face. What exactly did she want to get rid of? Her desire? Her guilt? Her shame? "It doesn't matter," she finally said. She left the shop and practically ran, because deep down, she knew that none of those things were the real problem. The only thing she truly needed to rid herself of was her love. Chapter 8. Adrian. More than anything else in the world, Adrian hated dealing with people. Because every person he spoke to was a potential client, someone who had come to make a wish, someone who had a desire. Adrian was exceptionally good at reading people's desires. It was his job, and in his experience, human wishes usually fell into two categories. Selfish wishes, which meant Adrian was forced to grant cruel, malicious desires that almost inevitably hurt other people. He had seen it all: power-hungry egotists, fools obsessed with control. And then there was the second category: selfless wishes, people who wanted to use their wish to help those they loved or make the world a better place. Adrian knew their hearts were in the right place, and that was precisely why it was so painful to watch them lose what they cherished most in the end. Fortunately, people in the second category were usually easier to talk out of making a wish, because they were driven by kindness, not selfishness, not cruelty. They were far more willing to listen to reason and walk away from a wish that would only make everything worse in the long run. But when they refused, Adrian could only sigh. According to Iris, the young werewolf girl had come by again today, Cassandra. She had been visiting him ever since she was a child, almost her entire life. She's a good person, Adrian thought. But she was frightened. She had been born into a world that taught her to hate instead of love, despite what her own heart was trying to tell her. Once, that little girl had amused him. She had spirit, she had courage, a little naive perhaps, like all children. Then again, Adrian saw everyone as children, even those who, by the standards of their own race, were already considered old. After all, he was a mortal. Compared to him, everyone seemed young and inexperienced. That was why he had never considered Cass any more naive than the rest of her people, not even when she was only 8 years old. He had sincerely hoped she would eventually outgrow the idea of making a wish, but every time Adrian managed to convince her to walk away, she always came back. Always. Each visit more desperate than the last, and each time harder to send her away again. "I think she's fallen in love with that Sebastian," Iris remarked that evening after telling him about Cass's latest visit, looking rather pleased with herself, as though she had made a brilliant observation. "You don't say," Adrian replied, trying to sound neutral. Instead, he sounded far too sarcastic. He immediately cursed himself inwardly. The problem was that Iris loved sarcasm, even though she pretended she didn't. It helped distract her from the enormous emptiness her father's death had left in her life. Adrian knew she enjoyed it, and that was exactly why he had promised himself long ago to stop speaking to her that way. He didn't want Iris to mistake her enjoyment of sarcasm for enjoying his company, because then she might start trusting him. And Iris wasn't the kind of person who seemed likely to make a wish one day. She had very few desires, very few ambitions. Iris was an unusually cynical person, and Adrian intended to do everything he could to keep it that way. "Oh, shut up," she shot back immediately. Yet the corners of her lips still curled into a faint smile. Whenever Iris smiled, Adrian found himself remembering what it had once felt like to smile himself. He didn't like that. And yet it kept happening, again and again. "This is going to end badly," Iris said, referring to Cassandra. "Most likely," Adrian replied, though he was no longer entirely sure which of them he was talking about. That was the problem with getting close to people. Eventually, you started to care. He had watched Cass grow up. Sometimes she came into his shop without any real intention of making a wish. She simply enjoyed watching his reactions. And if she ever truly asked him to grant one, it would make granting it all the more painful. "Would you mind if I stayed here tonight?" Iris asked casually after dinner. "No," Adrian thought. "Of course," he heard himself say instead. He didn't even want to imagine what would happen if the day ever came when he had to grant one of Iris's wishes. The thought alone made him regret that they had ever met. Chapter 9. Cassandra. Cass was 18 when a real fight broke out between members of her pack and Sebastian's. Later, she could no longer remember how it had started. She had been at a bar with her brother and several packmates. One of them, a guy named Finn, someone she had grown up with and considered a close friend, was teasing her, casually draping an arm around her shoulders. The gesture was so familiar that she barely noticed it. Or maybe it hadn't even happened. Lying in bed later that night, she wondered if it had actually happened yesterday, or the day before. Somewhere in the bar, Sebastian was there. She hadn't seen him yet, but she had recognized his scent, and she had noticed several wolves from his pack gathered around the pool table. "They've been hogging it for hours," Finn complained to Ronan. Her brother merely shrugged good-naturedly. Unlike Cass, Ronan had never enjoyed conflict. "We could just ask to play with them," he suggested. Everyone at their table groaned in unison. "What?" Ronan persisted, giving Cass a meaningful look. "Haven't we outgrown all these childish feuds? Come on." Reluctantly, Finn followed him toward the pool table. As he passed by, he gave Cass's shoulder a quick squeeze. She joked with the others for another minute, took a sip of her beer. Then the sharp sound of a heavy impact made her turn toward the back of the bar. She saw Finn. He had Sebastian by the shirt, pinning him against the wall. The scent pouring off him was furious and threatening. Cass was on her feet in an instant, stepping between them. "What are you doing?" she snapped at Finn. "He smells like you," her packmate replied. To Cass's horror, "Why does he smell like you?" The world stopped. This is it, she thought. This is the moment everything falls apart. The moment they would be exposed. The moment her future would crumble. She would lose her father's respect, lose her pack, and worst of all, lose Sebastian. If the truth came out, his parents might exile him to avoid a war, or, more likely, They would force him to take another mate and silence the rumors once and for all. Cass had already heard they were looking for suitable candidates for him. He was old enough now. Would he fight for her? The thought felt like betrayal. She met his eyes. She wanted to cry. Because it shouldn't matter. The pack always came first. The pack was more important than anything else. For Sebastian, it always would be. And she hated herself for resenting him because of that. She hated her own heart for begging her to put him above everything else. Then, amid the fear and despair, clarity came. There was only one way out. They could not be exposed. And they wouldn't be. Cass locked eyes with Sebastian. He was about to answer, but she cut him off. "We ran into each other behind the bar for a minute. We argued, that's all," she said quickly. Of course, that wasn't true.
If he smelled like her, it was only because they had spent the previous night together. And every night before that. It was a miracle no one had noticed sooner.
But Cass assumed everyone simply believed she and Sebastian were still doing what they had always done. Fighting. She needed to make sure everyone kept believing that. Except Ronan frowned. A flash of aggression crossed his face that startled even Cass. It wasn't like him. But the thought that someone had attacked his sister awakened every protective instinct he had. Ronan might hate conflict, but he knew how to protect the people he loved. "You attacked her by yourself?" he spat furiously. "Have you lost your mind? You're practically an alpha. You could have hurt her." "No, he couldn't," Cass protested, but Ronan wasn't listening. When Sebastian tried to explain, Ronan shoved him roughly aside, throwing Cass an irritated look. "We weren't fighting," Sebastian began. Cass's heart stopped. For one terrifying second, she imagined him telling her brother and her packmates what they had really been doing. "Yes, we were," she blurted, before she could even think. Ronan roared and charged Sebastian. One of Sebastian's friends immediately intercepted him, tackling him to the floor. Even Cass had to block a punch thrown by one of the girls standing near Sebastian. She forced the woman back, noticing how many people in the bar were now staring at them in shock. Sebastian noticed it too. "Enough," he commanded. Every wolf from his pack froze instantly. To Cass's annoyance, several wolves from her own pack did as well. But even his command couldn't stop Ronan. "Stay the hell away from my sister," he snarled, dragging Cass away with him. She glanced back at Sebastian, but he looked away, and Cass's heart tightened painfully. Didn't he understand? Didn't he see that she had done the right thing? That she had done it for both of them? "What were you thinking?" he demanded when they met later that night. "Telling your pack we'd been fighting." "What else was I supposed to say?" Cass shot back. "Finn smelled me on you. What would have happened if he figured it out?" "And then what?" Sebastian growled, turning away. "Would that really have been worse than everyone believing the future alpha attacked you by himself?" Cass's cheeks flushed. She stamped her foot in frustration, feeling utterly helpless. "You're not alpha yet, and I can beat you, you know that." When Sebastian looked back at her, his eyes burned with fury. "That doesn't matter anymore. In a few days, my father will make me alpha. I can't go around picking fights with just anyone, especially not someone from a rival pack." "I'm not just anyone!" Cass shouted, shoving him hard in the chest. "You know exactly what I mean," Sebastian replied with a bitter smile. "Do I?" she asked quietly, unable to hide the pain in her voice. For a moment, Sebastian's expression softened. Then he pressed his lips together. "Cass, you were the one who was afraid people would find out about us, not me." He shrugged helplessly. "What was I supposed to think?" "Especially after you let all those wolves touch you right in front of me." "There is no us, Sebastian," she shot back. "We're not together." Her heart pounded. Her throat tightened. Panic twisted inside her. "I can do whatever I want," With whoever I want. Sebastian suddenly caught her chin, forcing her to look up into his eyes. They had turned gold. His anger always did that. You're mine, he growled. No! Cass snapped, knocking his hand away. But he caught her hand instead, this time pulling her gently toward him. You could be. He rested his forehead against hers. I want you to be, Cass. I love. Something strange happened to Cass's heart, as though a piece of it had been torn away, by force, against her will. And that missing piece had flown straight into Sebastian's hands. Was this a trick? Just moments ago, he had called her just another wolf, hiding behind the title he was about to inherit, as though that should matter. But she was going to become an alpha too. Didn't that matter? She didn't belong to him. And what would it even mean if he did claim her? Her father had chosen her. Her father was counting on her. Once before, her father and her pack had lost something because of Sebastian's pack. Cass would not become the reason it happened again, especially if all of this was nothing more than an illusion. Why was Sebastian saying these things only now? Why not yesterday, when he had held her in his arms? Or earlier, when he'd had countless chances? Don't, she said sharply, stepping back. Her throat ached. There's nothing between us. You're nobody to me. Sebastian went pale. He searched her face carefully. It looked as though he wanted to pull her back into his arms. And suddenly, Cass realized she wanted that too. Fine, he said curtly. Then he turned around and walked away. Cass wanted to call after him. Her lips parted on their own, but no sound came out. Is this really the end? Is this the moment he finally got tired of me? The next day, Sebastian accepted her father's invitation to discuss the fight at the bar. He apologized for approaching Cass and swore it would never happen again. It never did. Chapter 10. Cassandra. Cass was 20 when her father told her and her brother that he had chosen her to become the next alpha. It was everything she had worked toward, everything she had dedicated her entire life to. As a child, she had imagined this moment countless times. She imagined pride. She imagined joy. She imagined what she would feel when she finally heard those words. She had never imagined feeling nothing. Ever since the night Sebastian walked away from her, there had been only emptiness inside. She kept living, kept telling herself it would all be worth it once she finally became alpha. Once she reached her goal. But now, Cass no longer knew what she had been expecting from Sebastian. What had she wanted him to do? She knew only one thing. His absence had become unbearable. Every day it pressed harder against her heart. And that very morning, she learned about his engagement. Soon he would be mated to a girl from another pack. Cass barely remembered what the girl looked like. She had never paid much attention to her. An alpha's daughter, from a powerful pack. Quite beautiful. But could she fight Sebastian the way Cass could? Could she beat him on a hunt? Could she love him as deeply as Cass did, know his body, understand what he liked, take care of him, make him happy? Cass? Her father called cautiously. Only then did Cass realize she had been silent the entire time. Ronan was staring at her in surprise as well. He had clearly expected his sister to be overwhelmed with joy now that her lifelong dream had come true. Thank you, Father, she murmured quietly, lowering her head. It's a great honor. I won't let you down. She wanted to cry. She should have been happy. This was everything she had ever wanted. So why did she feel absolutely nothing? Cass will become alpha, but I want to entrust something important to you as well, Ronan, their father continued, casting several cautious glances toward Cass. He stood, walked to a bookshelf, removed one of the books, and revealed a small safe hidden behind it. From inside, he took out a dagger in a protective sheath. "This dagger is yours now, Ronan," their father said. "It is a powerful weapon that has been passed down through our family for generations." One of the artifacts our ancestors repeatedly negotiated over with Sebastian's Alpha family. At the mention of Sebastian's name, Cass tensed. Ronan frowned, but quickly looked back at their father. "Protect it well, my son. This dagger can kill any wolf with a single scratch. It is coated in the most potent poison ever created for that purpose. Our ancestors wielded it in countless battles. I trust you to keep it safe." Ronan nodded sullenly. Cass barely heard any of it. "As you both know, Sebastian will soon take the daughter of a powerful alpha as his mate. He claims it won't influence his decisions when forming alliances, but we all know it will," their father concluded grimly. "You will both have to work hard to ensure our pack prospers just as much as theirs and never falls under another pack's influence." Those words echoed through Cass's mind as she prepared for bed, but not the ones about becoming alpha, and not the ones about the dagger Ronan had received. She couldn't care less how much work awaited them in the coming years. The only thing that mattered was whether Sebastian loved his future mate. 2 days later, everyone was invited to the engagement celebration held at Sebastian's home. Cass wore her most beautiful dress. She arranged her hair into an elegant style that exposed the long line of her neck. She hoped that if nothing else, for just one brief moment that evening, Sebastian would remember the time they had shared and feel something. Not even as much regret as she felt, just something. Instead, it was Cass who spent the entire evening watching Sebastian from across the ballroom. He danced with his fiancée, made toasts, told jokes that made the entire room laugh, and never looked at her. Cass felt something inside her die. With every passing glance, the pain grew worse. It was as though Sebastian had erased her from his life. Every touch he gave another woman stole the air from her lungs. His hand rested against the small of his fiancée's back. His lips leaned close to whisper something into her ear. What could he possibly be saying, if not words of love? Words Cass herself might have heard, if only she had been better, stronger, more interesting. But perhaps strength had never been the issue. Perhaps it had never been about being his equal. Perhaps it had always come down to one simple truth. She had been born into a pack destined to hate his, and his pack was destined to hate hers. When it became impossible to postpone congratulating the happy couple any longer, Cass forced herself to step forward, though it felt as if she wore heavy chains instead of a light silk gown. Sebastian was whispering something into his fiancée's ear. Her eyes sparkled with happiness. Something inside Cass's chest snapped painfully. "Congratulations," Cass said. She hated how lifeless her voice sounded. "On behalf of my entire pack, I'd like to congratulate you both on your engagement." The bride smiled warmly. She thanked Cass sincerely. There was so much happiness in her voice that it was almost unbearable to hear, knowing exactly what had made her so happy. Beside her, Sebastian remained perfectly composed. His face was unreadable. He merely inclined his head politely. "Thank you," he replied. Then he led his fiancée back onto the dance floor. Cass remained standing where she was. She almost couldn't believe how ordinary the exchange had been. She had expected contempt, or at least resentment. How dare Sebastian behave as though they were strangers? As though everything they had shared could simply be forgotten. As though it had been nothing more than an insignificant chapter of the past, instead of the wound that still bled inside her. She endured the humiliation with the composure she had been taught her entire life.
but her strength was fading. Until finally, she couldn't bear it anymore. She fled into the nearby library, just for a little while, just to hide from the pain. There she exhaled slowly, closed her eyes, tried to steady herself, and, if possible, think of a believable excuse to leave the celebration early without making a fool of herself. The sound of the door closing made her open her eyes. Sebastian stood in the doorway. He slowly looked around the room. Most importantly, he was alone. "What are you doing here?" Cass asked, before she could think of anything better. "What am I doing here?" Sebastian replied dryly. "You're standing in my house." Cass said nothing. She turned away, pretending to study the bookshelves. She had spent the entire evening unable to stop looking at him. But now that they were finally alone, now that no one stood between them, she couldn't make herself meet his eyes. "I think I'm the one who should be asking you that," Sebastian said with a faint, bitter laugh. There was mockery in his voice, and something much darker. "Hiding from the crowd doesn't seem like you." Cass flinched. "My father chose me to become the next Alpha," she answered, using the title like a shield, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was trying to protect herself from. A mocking smile tugged at Sebastian's lips. "Well, congratulations," he shrugged. "Isn't that everything you've always wanted?" Cass shot him a dark look. He answered with an even colder one. "Don't pretend it wasn't your goal." She lifted her chin proudly. "You can't blame me for—" "I'm not blaming you," Sebastian interrupted. His lips formed a thin line. Cass remembered those lips far too well. The thought that she would never kiss them again hollowed her out from the inside. "Then what is this?" she forced herself to ask. "Why did you follow me? Did you come here to gloat?" "Why would I gloat?" A complicated expression crossed Sebastian's face. So many words gathered on Cass's tongue, but he merely shook his head. "Have a good evening, Cassandra." "I'll see you at the next Alpha Council." He turned back toward the door, almost stepped through it, and Cass could no longer stop the words that escaped her. "Do you love her?" She barely recognized her own voice. There was so much desperation in it. Sebastian's shoulders stiffened. He stopped. "Do I love her?" he repeated quietly, turning back. A bitter smile appeared. "Isn't it obvious?" "I'm going to marry her." It felt as though someone had struck Cass across the face, especially beneath the weight of his gaze, the very gaze she had spent her entire life chasing, the one she could no longer bear. "Then I'm happy for you," she whispered. "Really?" Sebastian laughed bitterly. "Why do you even care how I feel?" "There was never anything between us." "You made that perfectly clear." The words were meant to hurt, and they did. They shattered every defense she had left. Cass began trembling. "So now you're pretending nothing ever happened?" She shook her head. Pain cracked through her voice. "If that's the case, then leave. I have nothing left to say to you." "You were the one who always acted as though there was nothing between us." "As though you were ashamed to be with me," Sebastian shot back. Now he was standing right in front of her. When had he crossed the room? His scent overwhelmed her. So close, so furious. "I don't remember you openly confessing your feelings every chance you got," she replied. She still had enough strength left to fight, though now it was the desperate struggle of a cornered animal. "I was always the one chasing your attention. My attention." His voice was almost devoid of emotion. "You never had to chase it. It always belonged to you. I always watched you. Always. Since we were children." "No," Cass whispered desperately. "You looked at me." "But you never truly saw me." "I looked." "I saw you." "And I've thought about no one but you for as long as I can remember," Sebastian growled. The words sounded as though they disgusted him,
as though he had to force them out before they destroyed him. But it's over now. His voice was cold, merciless. Something inside Cass broke. She raised a hand to wipe her eyes. Only then did she realize she was crying. She couldn't even remember when it had started. "It will never be over," she whispered. "Never." "You know that." "And so do I." Before Sebastian could answer, she cupped his face. Their lips crashed together in a desperate, almost painful kiss, more desperate than any they had shared before. His teeth and tongue claimed her instantly. Cass breathed softly against his lips. She surrendered. Let him pull her even closer. She wanted to give him everything, absolutely everything. His scent ignited with hunger. One hand settled against the small of her back, the other slipped into her hair, pulling free the pins holding her hairstyle together. Long, heavy blonde waves cascaded over her shoulders. Sebastian froze. He stared at them in silent admiration, then buried his face in them. "I don't want anything to do with you," he whispered, closing his eyes as he breathed in her scent. "I love you," Cass answered. The rest of her words died in her throat when she saw him flinch, as though she had physically hurt him. "No," he said, stepping back without meeting her eyes. "Enough." Cass opened her mouth, tried to stop him, tried to reach for him. But Sebastian walked out of the room without looking back, leaving her alone, just as defenseless. Later that night, she went to the mage's shop, only to find it closed, which wasn't surprising. Midnight was only minutes away. She didn't know it yet, but the next day, she would finally make her wish. Chapter 11. Cassandra. Cass was still 20 when she woke early that morning in her own bed, surprised and confused by the feeling of warm lips leaving gentle kisses along her neck. She was almost certain she had fallen asleep alone. By all rights, she should have been frightened. She should have panicked at waking up like this. Instead, all she felt was warmth, a pleasant, sleepy haze that grew stronger with every passing second. A familiar scent surrounded her. It mingled with her own the way it hadn't in years, the way she had desperately longed for all this time. She felt a strong body pressed against hers, arms wrapped around her waist. Yet it all felt so natural, so right, that it never even occurred to her to pull away. "Sebastian," she breathed, feeling him smile against her neck. In the darkness, she met his gaze. His pupils were wide, his eyes were dark with desire, and with something else she couldn't immediately explain. "What are you doing here?" she asked softly, brushing her fingers against his cheek. It was reckless. He had come into her room in the middle of the night without invitation. But she didn't want him to think his presence was unwelcome. Even less did she want to see him leave because she had said the wrong thing. Her mind was still clouded with sleep. She probably should have been thinking more clearly, but she had never expected to see him again so soon. Certainly not like this. He pulled her closer, then claimed her lips in a slow, desperately passionate kiss. A quiet sigh escaped her. Then she suddenly pulled back. "You've been drinking," she accused, frowning in confusion. "Maybe," he murmured with a faint smile before kissing her neck again. "I was celebrating my engagement. Remember?" Cass ran her fingers through his hair, breathing in his scent for a moment as she gathered the strength to push him away, as she should. "About that engagement," she began reluctantly, especially after feeling his hand glide over her bare leg. "Shouldn't you be with your fiancé instead of here?" Sebastian mumbled something into her skin. Cass rolled her eyes, caught him gently by the hair, and made him pull back just enough. "What?" "I said," he smiled lazily, "I don't have a fiancé anymore." I ended the engagement. He leaned in to kiss her again. Cass turned her face away. He let out a quiet groan. Why? She asked, searching his face. His eyes were warm, but hazy with alcohol. I didn't want to marry her, he answered, holding her tighter. Cass drew a shaky breath. Sebastian, she frowned. You told me you loved me, he whispered, barely brushing her lips. How could I take someone else as my mate, if you love me? He lowered his lips to her collarbone. Cass gasped, not only because of his touch, but because of his words. Tears filled her eyes. I thought, she whispered, I thought you wanted nothing to do with me. Tell me again that you love me, Sebastian whispered. Please, Cass. Say it again. She gently cupped his face. I love you, she answered quietly, never looking away. She watched his pupils widen even more with relief and happiness. Her entire life, she had wanted only one thing, for him to look only at her. Everything she had ever done had been for that single moment. His teeth brushed lightly against her skin. Cass's scent changed instantly. Sebastian felt it. His touch became even more urgent. Cass, he breathed as she pulled him into another kiss. I can't do this anymore. I love you. I need you. She rested against his shoulder, unable to stop reaching for him. Then you'll have me, she whispered. But not now. Not in my parents' house. And not while you're drunk. But it seemed he heard only the first part. His hands hurried toward her nightgown. I was losing my mind tonight thinking about you, he whispered. Then he corrected himself. Tonight? Every night. All the time. He kissed her again, letting out a quiet groan, when this time Cass kissed him back first. His fingers felt burning hot. His scent made her so dizzy that she almost felt as though she were the one who had been drinking. When she felt his teeth near her neck, she unexpectedly pulled him even closer. And in that moment, she understood. She wanted him to make her his mate, and she wanted to be able to call him hers. But almost immediately, she forced herself to stop. Not like this. Not while he wasn't himself. Sebastian, she whispered. A shiver ran through her body. Please, don't stop. Yet despite the words, she only tilted her neck toward him even more. Her mind said no. Her body had already stopped resisting. His teeth touched her skin. Cass cried out. The very next second, another scream echoed through the room. Ronan's. Sebastian jerked violently above her. Pain twisted across his face. Get away from her! Ronan shouted. He appeared in Cass's line of sight so suddenly that she froze. How had he gotten in? What had he seen? What had he heard? She had to explain. But Sebastian suddenly collapsed heavily onto her, groaning in agony. As she tried to hold him up, she felt something warm and wet running down his back. Blood. She knew it before she even looked down at her own hands. They were stained crimson. Cass, are you okay? Ronan asked in horror as he tried to pull Sebastian away from her. Was he trying to force you? Cass was too shocked to answer. She carefully lowered Sebastian's head into her lap. He looked stunned. His jaw was clenched tightly with pain. What did you do? She screamed at her brother. Cass, he was about to hurt you, Ronan shouted back. I heard you tell him no. Cass's heart clenched. She understood exactly what her brother believed had happened. Then her eyes fell upon the dagger in his hands. The same dagger he had driven into Sebastian's back. Is that Father's dagger? She whispered, afraid of the answer. Ronan pressed his lips together. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across his face. He was going to hurt you, he repeated, as though trying to convince himself. No, he wasn't. She looked him straight in the eyes. I love him, Ronan. Sebastian and I have been lovers for years. Her brother's eyes widened in shock, but Cass's attention was already elsewhere. Sebastian weakly whispered her name. His fingers tightened around her wrist. Cass. Then he lost consciousness. Stay with me, she whispered frantically, stroking his hair. Please don't fall asleep. Please, stay with me. Despair tightened around her throat as his eyes finally closed. She looked up at Ronan. His eyes held accusation, fear, 1,000 unanswered questions. But they were twins, and he understood too. This wasn't the time to ask them. I'll get father, Ronan said quickly, rushing toward the door. Chapter 12. Cassandra. There were exactly 2 hours left before Cass would make her wish. But first, there had to be one final conversation. How could both of you be so reckless? As expected, her father was furious when he found the alpha of their enemy pack lying unconscious and half undressed in his daughter's bed. How could you possibly let him into this house? He snapped at Cass, with open contempt before turning to Ronan. And you, why did you use that weapon? You could have simply pulled him away from your sister. I thought he was... Ronan couldn't finish the sentence. Shame twisted across his face. Their father rubbed a tired hand over his face. This is a disaster, he murmured, more to himself than to either of his children. One of you, perhaps both of you, will have to answer for... He gestured vaguely towards Sebastian's unconscious body. Cass held him tightly in her arms. Our pack's reputation will suffer enormously. And that's not even mentioning how much this is going to cost us. You're seriously talking about money and our reputation while he's dying? Cass interrupted in horror. Sebastian's face had grown frighteningly pale. A feverish sheen covered his forehead. His breathing was heavy. Only her desperate determination to keep him alive was stopping Cass from falling apart completely. Isn't there anything that can heal him? She whispered, already terrified of the answer. But it came anyway. Final. Hopeless. No, her father answered quietly. For the first time, genuine sorrow crossed his face. I'm sorry, Cass. Then why keep something so dangerous in this house? She growled, tears filling her eyes. Why not bury it and be rid of it forever? Her father cut her off sharply. I keep it to protect my family. Cass glared at him. Sebastian is my family too. He's my mate now. Her father's eyes blazed with fury. Your mate? How? The usual way, Cass answered quietly. She leaned down and kissed Sebastian's forehead again as another painful groan escaped his lips. With disgust, she watched her father begin pacing across the room. He already seemed to be forming a plan. We can use this, he muttered under his breath. Sebastian is an alpha. He broke into your room during the night. He forced himself on you. He claimed you. Your brother defended you. I wanted him to claim me, Cass shouted furiously. Then keep that to yourself, her father roared. If you want both you and your brother to stay alive. His voice carried the full force of an alpha's command. It was more than enough. Cass felt the order seize her entire body, right down to her spine. Ronan, come with me. Cass, stay here with him. We need to prepare for the council. There will be an investigation. If we approach the other packs ourselves before Sebastian's people accuse us first, it'll look better. Cass was left alone. Only her dying mate remained beside her. She cradled his face against her chest, whispering soft, comforting words, hoping that somehow he could still hear her, that somehow they would help him hold on just a little longer. I'll fix this, she whispered. You're going to be okay. I promise. The first rays of sunrise had only begun touching the sky when Cass was already pounding on the mage's door. It felt as though hours had passed. In reality, no more than 5 minutes. Iris was simply a very light sleeper and came downstairs almost immediately to answer the door. "Please," Cass begged, grabbing her hand. "We're out of time." "Get your master." A few minutes later, Adrian followed Iris into the sitting room. His hair was as messy as ever. Cass stood waiting for him, terrified, but determined. "This time you won't talk me out of it," she said, rising from her chair and clenching her fists. "You're going to grant my wish." "I don't care what the price is." Chapter 13. Cassandra. When Cass returned to her PAX headquarters, she was still 20 years old, but she felt ancient. Her body ached. Every movement took effort. Every color, every scent, every sound, they all seemed different, faded, as though she had stepped into another world, a diluted version of the one she had known. A world where she was always cold, but more than anything, she felt empty and alone. She barely noticed the journey home, only when Ronan came running toward her, waving his arms excitedly. "Sebastian woke up!" he exclaimed, grabbing both her hands. "He's going to be okay. Father and the other alphas are discussing everything that happened right now, but he's not sick anymore, so everything—" Ronan suddenly stopped. Only then did he notice the vacant, distant look in his sister's eyes. "Cass, can you hear me?" She heard him, and she felt overwhelming relief that Sebastian had survived, though she had never truly doubted it. That was exactly what she had wished for. "Cass?" Ronan took hold of her shoulders. "What's wrong with you? Are you still angry with me? You can stop worrying now. Your mate is going to be fine." "He's not my mate," Cass answered quietly, lowering her eyes. Only then did she notice she was barefoot. "But before you said—" "No," Cass interrupted softly, taking a slow step away. At that moment, their mother rushed out of the house. "Cassandra, where have you been?" She hurried over to them. "Everyone's waiting for you inside. What am I hearing about you and Sebastian? Did the two of you become mates?" "No," Cass answered evenly. And suddenly she realized voices sounded different now. Like hearing a recording of your own voice and not recognizing it. Only now, everything felt that way. "What happened?" her mother asked anxiously, cupping Cass's face in both hands. "What happened, sweetheart?" Cass didn't answer. She kept staring at the ground. Not because she didn't want to speak. The words simply wouldn't come. She felt that if she didn't say them, they wouldn't become real. "Cass?" Her mother tried again. Then, all at once, she understood. Her eyes flew wide with horror. "Oh my God." At first it was barely a whisper. Then she screamed. A piercing ringing filled Cass's ears. Her bare feet felt the cold grass beneath them. Her mother was screaming in terror. Cass couldn't bring herself to look into her eyes. She thought Ronan was asking something too. She wasn't sure anymore. Perhaps he had figured it out as well. Before, she would have sensed his fear instantly, by his scent, but now, she couldn't smell him anymore. She could barely smell anything at all. And that was so strange, so terrifying. Chapter 14. Cassandra. "So your wish is for your mate to recover?" the mage asked. His expression turned serious. This time, he understood. After all these years, there would be no talking Cass out of it. "Yes," she nodded, tears filling her eyes. "He's dying." Adrian studied her silently for a long moment before speaking again. "I've already explained the rules to you. If I grant your wish, I'll have to take away whatever is most precious to you." Cass frowned. "Sebastian is the most precious thing in my life." So, if you save him, you'll just take him away afterward? Adrian shook his head. No, I don't take human lives. But if he truly is what matters most to you, and I say if, because that can never be known with certainty beforehand, then most likely, you'll be forced apart. He'll live, but he won't be able to be with you. Cass's shoulders sagged. If the choice was between Sebastian's death and his life without her, she would choose the second. Deep down, she still believed they would somehow find their way back to each other someday. All her life, she had feared they would never be allowed to love each other openly. She refused to let that fear control her anymore. She was determined to stay by his side. Do it, she said firmly. Save him. That's my wish. Adrian took her hand, closed his eyes. For several long seconds, he remained silent. Then he abruptly let go. You're pregnant, he said, his voice heavy with hesitation. What? Cass froze, terrified, stunned. For several moments, she stared blankly around the shop, trying to process what she'd just heard. That can't be. It hasn't even been a full day since we last... She couldn't finish. Understanding slowly spread across her face. Can you feel it? Adrian asked carefully. Cass nodded reluctantly. I think, yes. Or at least my wolf does. It's already trying to protect the baby. What does that mean? Iris asked. Is there a chance the wish could harm the child? The uncertainty returned to Adrian's face. Before you make your wish, he said quietly, I'm going to tell you what I'll take. Iris gasped. But you said the client is never supposed to know the price beforehand. She stopped. Adrian's cold glance silenced her. It's all right, he said evenly. Cass looked from Iris to the mage in confusion, but her thoughts were elsewhere. We don't have much time, she whispered. Adrian took her hand once more, closed his eyes, focusing on his magic. When he spoke again, his voice sounded heavier than ever. The thing you value most is being Sebastian's mate. Cass nodded. That was exactly what she had expected. So I'll make it impossible for the two of you ever to become true mates. I'll take away the part of you that makes that possible. Cass went completely still. Slowly, the meaning of his words sank in. You mean, my wolf? She finally asked in a colorless voice. You're going to turn her into a human? Iris asked quietly. Yes, Adrian answered. Cass placed a trembling hand over her stomach. Her heart was breaking. But my baby... The baby will still have a wolf, won't it? Tears filled her eyes. Most likely, yes, Adrian answered gravely. And in all likelihood, you won't be able to raise the child. He looked paler than usual, almost ash-gray. I understood that this was the price of breaking the rules. He had revealed the cost of the wish before it was made. But I said nothing. Our client was already carrying more pain than anyone should have to bear. Cass closed her eyes, took a deep breath, even though it trembled. Do it, she said in an empty voice. Grant my wish. She never felt her wolf leave. One moment, Cass could hear her wolf howling in agony. The next, she was simply gone, as though she had never existed. It didn't hurt, but the sudden dullness of her senses, the unfamiliar weight of her own body, the strange new sensations made her gasp in horror. Worst of all was the emptiness, complete emptiness inside her. She staggered and screamed. Now she stood among her own pack once again, but she could no longer feel them. She couldn't read their emotions through scent. She no longer instinctively knew what they were feeling. It was terrifying. Yet even more terrifying was feeling so utterly alone, as though she had lost not a hand, not a leg, but an entire piece of her soul. "How is this possible?" Ronan asked, searching her face. Their mother was already crying. Her scream drew their father from the house. "What happened?" he demanded. "The mage did this to me," Cass answered tonelessly. "Because none of it matters anymore." "The wish-granting mage?" her father asked. "The one who lives in town?" Cass neither heard nor sensed Sebastian approaching. She no longer smelled him before he arrived, so she flinched when he suddenly appeared in front of her. At first,
A bright, hopeful smile lit his face. But the moment he looked into Cass's eyes, it disappeared.
"What happened?" he asked quickly, stepping closer. The other alphas followed him in. They must have still been discussing everything that had happened between him and Ronan. "Did the mage do this to you?" Ronan asked, turning pale. "Did he take your wolf?" Cass nodded. "I asked him to." She hurried to say it before either Ronan or her father decided to go after Adrian. "But why?" Ronan asked, his voice full of pain. Sebastian stepped closer, gently cupped her face. "Look at me," he whispered. But she couldn't. It hurt too much. Now, he could never truly be hers. "So that's why he recovered," her father said quietly, casting Sebastian a dark look. "Magic."
Sebastian didn't even glance at him. He continued, gently asking Cass to look at him, softly stroking her cheek with his thumb. She stepped away. "I want to be alone." Then she turned and walked away, before anyone could stop her. She was human now. Any one of them could have caught her easily. Perhaps the fact that no one did meant something. Chapter 15. Cassandra. Cass turned 21 the week Sebastian insisted on seeing her. A week had passed since everything happened. Somewhere during those days, her birthday had quietly come and gone. Cass had barely noticed. She only vaguely heard Ronan arguing with Sebastian outside her bedroom door. "She doesn't want to see anyone," Ronan said, or something like that. "I don't care. It's been a week. I need to talk to her," Sebastian insisted. He said something else that Cass couldn't quite make out. Then the door opened. Cass was sitting by the window with her knees drawn to her chest. Her long hair hung loose and tangled down her back. The moment Sebastian saw her, his eyes widened. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and the familiar scent of the she-wolf was gone, replaced by nothing more than the faint fragrance of an ordinary human. "Cass," he whispered, as though saying her name alone allowed him to breathe again. He dropped to his knees before her, then wrapped her tightly in his arms. Cass told herself not to get used to it. "What are you doing here?" she asked in the same empty, colorless voice that refused to leave her. "What do you think?" Sebastian sighed, breathing in her scent. "Do I smell strange?" she asked before she could stop herself. Anxiety slipped into her voice. Sebastian buried his face in her hair. "You smell exactly the same. Just fainter." Cass closed her eyes. "I'm glad you came." She felt his shoulders relax immediately. "I've wanted to talk to you." Sebastian laughed quietly. "Really? Is that why everyone spent an entire week keeping me away from you?" Cass ignored the question. If she didn't say it now, she never would. She had repeated these words to herself ever since the day she made her wish. "I'm sorry I ruined your engagement." She kept staring out the window, unable to look at him. Sebastian laughed again. "Don't apologize." But Cass interrupted him. "If you try, I'm sure your fiancée will change her mind. And if she doesn't, there will be others." Sebastian frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You're my mate." "No," Cass answered sharply. "I'm not anymore."
I'm human. So what? You know perfectly well that a true mate bond can't exist between a wolf and a human. That was why she had become human, but she didn't tell him that. For a long moment, Sebastian remained silent, still holding her. Is that what worries you? He finally asked. That we can't have a true mate bond anymore? Something inside Cass shattered. Did it really mean so little to him? When I told you I loved you, I meant it. For the first time in days, tears filled her eyes again, as if they had simply been waiting for him to arrive. Or did you think I only said it to hurt you? Sebastian stared at her in disbelief. I know you meant it. He quickly met her eyes. So did I. Cass rolled her eyes. You never actually said it. She hid her face against her knees. Sebastian hugged her again, resting his forehead against her arm. I love you too, Cass. I thought that was obvious. To everyone except you. It doesn't matter anymore, she whispered. There was finality in her voice. Sebastian tensed, but he didn't let go. Why would you say that? It's the only thing that matters to me. Are you really that dense? Cass burst out. It was almost impossible for us to be together before. At least, I thought it was. But it turned out it wasn't. Now, it really is. I don't understand, Sebastian admitted, gently taking her face in his hands. She let out a weary sigh. Had he really not figured it out yet? Sebastian, you're a wolf. An alpha. I'm human. I can't be your mate. And you need a mate if you want to remain alpha of your pack. I know, he answered calmly. Cass nearly shook him in frustration. I can't live among your people, much less be your mate. Sebastian rolled his eyes, then gently covered her mouth with his hand. I've already told my pack I'm giving up the title. Watching her eyes widen, he hurried to continue. Did you really think I'd let my wife live somewhere she'd be in danger? I'm not your mate, Cass whispered. Even as a wild, impossible hope began to grow inside her. You're mine. But if you don't like that word, then do me the honor of becoming my wife. As far as I know, humans do perfectly well with husbands and wives. Cass slowly shook her head. Sebastian, you can't. You've spent your entire life preparing to become alpha. I won't let you give up everything for me. He looked almost offended. You won't let me? Cass, I'm hardly sacrificing anything. But you gave up your wolf for me. A huge part of who you are. If you honestly think I'm incapable of giving up something infinitely smaller for you. I'm pregnant, Cass interrupted, watching his face carefully. She expected despair. Instead, his expression first filled with shock, then pure joy. Really? He breathed. I might not survive the birth. I may never get the chance to raise our child myself. Is it mine? Sebastian asked, his eyes wide with hope and disbelief. Cass let out a quiet groan. Whose else would it be, you idiot? There has never been anyone but you. Sebastian met her eyes and smiled. Everything's going to be all right, he said, as long as we're together. Everything will be all right. Chapter 16. Adrian. A silver ring rested at the center of the pentagram, reflecting the dim candlelight as Adrian slowly moved his hands above it. Ancient symbols carved into the wooden table shimmered with a faint blue glow, responding to his movements. To the remnants of his own magic, not demonic magic, his own, the pitiful amount of power he still possessed. Despite the cold room, sweat trickled down his forehead. His hands trembled slightly, whether from exhaustion or from the illness that had plagued him ever since he broke the rules for Cassandra. Most likely both. He narrowed his eyes, focusing entirely on the ring. His own magic could accomplish very little. A small charm here, a protective enchantment there. Nothing remotely comparable to the overwhelming power that reshaped people's destinies whenever he granted wishes. Still, it was magic. His magic. "You're not listening to a word I'm saying, are you?" Iris's voice drifted toward him. Her words sounded muffled, as though coming through water. He vaguely realized she had been talking for quite some time. "You explained the consequences to her over and over. You warned her what would happen. This isn't your fault. You're not the one who stabbed her boyfriend. And you never wanted to grant her wish in the first place." Adrian blinked. The spell faltered as his concentration slipped. "Be quiet," he snapped, surprised by the harshness in his own voice. "I need to concentrate." "I wasn't expecting you to listen anyway," she muttered. She sounded more irritated than angry. He turned his attention back to the ring. The silver had grown warm, almost hot. It absorbed the power Adrian poured into it. The mage whispered the final incantation. The ancient words left the taste of ashes in his mouth. For one brief instant, the ring blazed with brilliant light. Then it became an ordinary silver ring once more. "It's finished," he said, reaching for it. But the moment his fingers closed around the metal, the room tilted. His vision blurred. He staggered. "Iris," he called softly. She was beside him instantly, catching him before he fell. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone so delicate. "You didn't have to shout," she muttered, supporting him by the waist. He frowned. He hadn't realized she was standing so close. She was warm, alive, and he had to force himself not to lean into that warmth, not to reach for it. "Take this to Cassandra," he said, gently pulling away and placing the ring in Iris's palm. She frowned, examining it. "What is it?" "What she sacrificed." Her frown deepened. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand." "I'm not asking you to," Adrian answered sharply. Another migraine exploded behind his eyes. "Just give the ring to Cass." He sank heavily into the nearest armchair, far less gracefully than he would have liked. With a snap of his fingers, a glass of wine appeared. The first sip brought immediate relief. The pain dulled. The thoughts that had been slicing through his mind like broken glass softened. He closed his eyes, savoring the brief respite, already looking forward to the blissful oblivion that would come if he drank enough. "And what am I supposed to tell her?" Iris asked. "Something like, 'Hi, this is for you. It's a ring. Probably enchanted. Not entirely sure. Might even be dangerous.'" "By itself, it won't help her very much," Adrian replied without opening his eyes. "The magic inside it has been sealed. Just tell her that if she, or any of her descendants, ever needs my help, they should come to me with this ring." "So, it's like a promise ring?" Iris asked. Adrian chuckled quietly. He snapped his fingers again, summoning a second glass of wine. The first one was already empty. "You could call it that." He heard Iris shift her weight. Still, he didn't open his eyes. "You said the ring contains what you took from her." Adrian gave the faintest nod. "So, her wolf is inside it?" "Her ability to shift is sealed within it." "Yes," he confirmed. The alcohol had only just begun to take effect, unfortunately. He snapped his fingers again, this time calling for something stronger. "But you told me you couldn't give it back," Iris said anxiously. Adrian opened his eyes. Truthfully, she didn't look nearly as worried as she sounded. That was good. Then again, she had an exceptional poker face. He knew that. She always beat him at poker, even though Adrian cheated shamelessly every single game. "I can't return it directly," he admitted. "For her to regain her power, I would have to die. But I want her to have the chance." Iris was silent for a while. "You're immortal," she finally said. Matter-of-factly, it was simply true. And Cassandra isn't. She'll die long before you. So will most people, Adrian answered sharply, taking another drink, this time not because he was thirsty,
because he couldn't bear looking at Iris any longer. "If I'm ever gone," he said quietly, "then she, or whoever inherits this ring, will be able to restore her ability to shift."
"But that will never happen," Iris said stubbornly. Her voice was no longer calm. "If it does," Adrian interrupted before she could continue, "then let this ring at least become the symbol of my promise to look after her and everyone she loves as much as I'm able." Iris fell silent again. "Why don't you give it to her yourself?" "Because I couldn't bear the sadness in her eyes. Because I'm a coward. Because she'll never even be allowed to see me. Her mate won't let her." But aloud, he said something else. "Because she won't be able to. Her mate won't allow it." Iris waited silently until Adrian finally looked at her. His vision was already beginning to blur. The alcohol pleasantly dulled everything. Thank God for alcohol. He couldn't imagine surviving without it.
"All right," Iris said quietly after a long pause. She walked toward the door. "When I get back, I'll make dinner." She looked over her shoulder. "I'll come back, okay?" Adrian let out a weary sigh. "You'd be better off not coming back. But what scares me even more is the possibility that you really won't." "If that's what you want," was all he said. When the door closed behind her, he lifted the bottle straight to his lips. He drank slowly, steadily, trying to drown himself in oblivion. Part of him hoped he would lose consciousness before Iris returned. That would be easier than facing her concern again, her kindness, something he didn't deserve. But another part of him listened intently to every sound beyond the door, afraid of only one thing, that this time, she really wouldn't come back. Epilogue. Iris. Cass was 22 when Iris saw her again. Adrian had asked her to deliver a gift for the baby. Iris did not understand why he had refused to do it himself. She suspected he felt guilty about what had happened, though, in truth, very little of it had been his fault, or anyone else's for that matter. It was simply how circumstances had unfolded. After everything that happened, he had done everything he could to help Cass, and Iris had never expected that from him. During the time she had spent working beside him, she had come to understand that he did not enjoy granting wishes. They almost never brought happiness to his clients. But she had never seen him risk his own health so recklessly, openly breaking the rules, the way he had for Cass. Perhaps he truly had grown deeply attached to her, no matter how much he denied it. When Iris arrived at their home, Cass was holding a 4-month-old baby in her arms. She looked thinner than before, more fragile. But the child was healthy, and so was her husband. So despite everything, they seemed happy. "What's his name?" Iris asked politely. Truthfully, she did not care. But she did not regret asking. Cass's eyes lit up at once. "Harry, short for Harrison. Sebastian is a huge fan of human movies." "Star battles?" "Star Wars," Sebastian corrected her, giving Cass a pained look. Iris had never seen any of the 3 Star Wars films, though she was almost certain the main character was not named Harrison. Lucas, perhaps, or Luke. She wisely decided to change the subject. "This is a gift from Adrian," she told Cass, holding out a small box. Sebastian looked as though he was seriously considering snatching it away, but one look from Cass calmed him. "What is it?" "His promise," Iris replied. "If you or anyone in your family ever needs help, come to the shop with this ring. Adrian will do everything he can." "Can we come right now and ask him to turn Cass back into a wolf?" Sebastian asked. "In a few days, we'll have to give our son to her brother for his own safety. She doesn't show it,
but I know she lies awake at night because of it. We already decided we won't take the risk of trying to undo everything, Cass said firmly, holding the baby more tightly. It's impossible to restore her wolf, Iris explained. To do that, her wish would have to be undone, and that isn't possible. But if there's anything else we can— You've already done enough, Sebastian said sharply as he escorted her toward the door. Thank you, Cass said quietly behind her. Tell him thank you. Iris met her gaze. Despite everything, Cass truly was grateful, especially when she looked at Sebastian. Iris understood. Without Adrian, he would not be standing there now. On her way back, she found herself wondering, could she ever love someone that deeply? Deeply enough to sacrifice almost everything for them? Several hours later, as she was closing the shop, she asked Adrian, "Have you ever been in love?" But he did not answer. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed returning to this story. Share your thoughts. What do you think of Cassandra's decision? Do you see it as reckless? Or do you believe it was the only choice she could have made? Leave a comment and give this video a like. Your support helps the channel grow and allows us to create even more stories. With love, Karina and Mia.